Meenakshi ma'am, thank you very much for joining us here at the CNN News 18 G20 Town Hall. I'm sure you're very busy in the run-up. This is the G20 week. This is where it all culminates. The last year's efforts, India has hosted more than 150, I believe, 175 G20 meetings. What does this feel like? Does it feel like you're at the last 10 meters of a 100-meter race?
Absolutely. It's like the moment. You're not quite there, but you're about to be there, and that anxiety along with excitement. So it's a lot of last-minute legwork, which is on.
So tell us, what has the last year meant? I mean, India's G20 presidency, the moment the gavel got handed over to the Prime Minister in Bali by the Indonesian President, we have seen more than 100+ meetings from Srinagar to Thiruvananthapuram, from Gujarat to Arunachal. It's almost like a people's G20.
Sure.
How will this be remembered?
So I think every Indian who's been part of it would remember it that this happened in 2023 when India completed 75 years of its independence. Right. So 2023 has been a watershed moment for us for many things. We would be remembering Chandrayaan 3, we would be remembering Aditya L1. So a lot of things which have happened in 23, and G20 is one such thing. When we hosted heads of states, the whole city was painted, colored, happiness all over. And because, as you rightly pointed out, people's movement, I mean, it's people's participation. Democracy is about people's participation, and no policy making can be just closed doors, and without people being party to it, and especially when India has specifically taken a lead when it comes to culture and showcasing its culture. You can't showcase your culture unless people are stakeholders in that. So that's what India has tried to showcase.
So India has kept this theme, this slogan of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. And clearly, you know, whether it's on issues like climate change, sustainable development, is the world and the G20 countries realizing that the future is shared, that unless one looks out for the other, you will not be able to, you know, we won't survive. We won't survive as a planet.
I think by the tagline itself, we've tried to bring everyone together, and everyone supported us on this. So people have been with us on this, and everyone is realizing that while we all are here in this room, we are happy, but pandemic happened not way far back. It was just around. Human memory is such that we try to block bad things. So we may have blocked it, but it was there. So this is a time when world is going through polycrisis, actually. And at that point in time, when the situation across the globe is that of meddling in polycrisis situation, credibility of multilateral institutes need to be kept. And India believes in both, that we need to find solutions, we need to showcase resilience, and we believe in multilateralism. So G20 is happening at that point in time. And India's role as a chair becomes important on many fronts, and this being the root of whatever else happens.
But this multilateralism itself, isn't it facing a bit of a crisis moment, if you will? It is a divided world. You have the West on the one side, you have, because of the Ukraine war, you have Russia on the one side, and now increasingly we're seeing China also sort of, I wouldn't say in the corner, you know, if we were to use a sporting term, they seem to be in one corner. Where does Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam fit in this divided world?
So I would say that when we had Raisina dialogue, and at that point in time, I used some term, and I'm going to reuse that term. I said, the world knows about global north and global south. And global north has been the developed world, industrialized world. Global south has been the world which has lagged behind or less developed. India, by virtue of being top 5 economies, top 5th economy, We are global north, and thus we are in G20, but we are 1.4 billion people, thus we represent global south as well. So we are the right people to bridge that gap. And to bridge the gap, somebody in the room, especially when economic policies are going to be discussed, need to take the whole world forward. And then India is rightly placed to act as a bridge between the two, because we have experience of the two, and we are an aspirational country which is there in scientific terms, in technology, in trained manpower, and yet we have plenty of challenges. That's one. Sustainability, availability of finance, so on and so forth. Because you get highly impacted by any policy which gets to be made, plus the resources which need to be used by the north are with the south. So the resource management is as much part of well-being of everyone. So to strike a balance between the two extremes, India needs to act as a bridge. On the other front, we are a civilization of the East. We are Eastern people. And by our institutional mechanism, democracy, rule of law, the High Court, Supreme Court, Election Commission, so on and so forth, Parliament, fantastic democracy, transfer of power without any difficulty. So all these things make us very much a country of the West. So we are very rightly placed to act as a bridge between the East and the West as well. So India is in a centralized position to speak on variety of subjects, because we have a variety of experience in all those fronts. So,
in fact, you'll be happy to know, and I'll share this with our audiences as well, talking about the Global South. Just today, Prime Minister Modi has given a text interview to our sister publication, Money Control, and he's talked about India becoming the voice of the Global South. And I want to ask you about that as well, because India has now proposed the African Union be added to the G20. I believe it's been received very well by members of the G20. And the Troika, that is the past president of the G20, the current president and the next president.
And the quartet.
Yeah, and they're all sort of backing for the voice of the Global South.
Yes.
Do you think the time has come for G20, which was seen as this elite organization, to be more open and accepting of other large voices in the world which are not in the room, as you said?
As till now, that is how G20 was looked at, because it was a group of 20 most economically sound countries, where who controlled 85% of the global GDP, 65% or maybe more, 75% of trade and commerce, and close to 60% population. So obviously it makes a very, very powerful group. But this powerful group cannot be industrialized, cannot sustain itself until and unless the resource management from the Global South happens. So both sides need to look after each other, and the voice, by virtue of being the voice of the voiceless, we've tried to do that. That while sustainability, industrialization, renewable energy, everything becomes important, but the worst impacted countries are the countries from the Global South. And then climate finance, investment, etc. becomes important. Technology transfer, skill management becomes important for those countries. So unless we think of a subject in a comprehensive manner, it will not lead to any result. So for fruitification of the entire policy on trade, commerce or economy, both sides need to meet at some point and discuss it openly. Some heart-to-heart talk needs to happen, and that's what we propose.
Ma'am, you're also the MOS for culture, you're also a lawyer, so I think you're the best placed person to answer this question. This is the biggest talking point of the day, that India, that is Bharat. We have seen the invites that have gone out in the President's name, the President of Bharat. What is the cultural sort of background to this, and what is the thinking as to why? I mean, is a renaming going to happen, or is it going to be used interchangeably?
I think we wasted a lot of time on this.
Okay.
And I would say this because, you see, many a times in public life, somebody pitches something, you've got to respond. And, but it's an inane subject. Something as inane as Bharat or India, I mean, these are interchangeable words. And there is nothing much which turns on this, but few people have tried to sort of polarize, create lot of hullabaloo around this word. So I would say let this be rested and not to waste any more time on this. As of now, the Constitution of India permits interchangeability of the word, and both words are applicable. So,
but you are not joining issue with the opposition saying that this is in response to the
no,
INDIA alliance.
I will only join issue on the second part. I dot N dot D dot
Yeah.
I dot A dot.
Yeah.
Because, I remember Mr. Kharge's interview where he specifically said this coalition, I dot N dot D dot I dot A dot, does not represent India. That's it. I will go and pick up that word, that no matter who named us in India or we are called India, they better not usurp that because they do not represent India. They represent a coalition which was earlier called UPA. They can rebrand themselves, they are free to do so, and India's full form is Bharat. India can be called Bharat, but I dot N dot D dot I dot A dot is something else which Mr. Kharge can very well answer. I don't even remember.
Okay. And as a lawyer, you're not thinking of any changing of articles of constitution, amendment?
You see, as a lawyer, I go on evidence-based mechanism.
Yeah.
As a lawyer, I feel you can't really jump the gun, you can't really work on suspect subjects, you can't really, start to sort of say things preemptively. I don't think, as of now, what I see, India and Bharat are interchangeable. Traditionally, we call ourselves Bharat. India is also a term which is used by the world. So it's both interchangeable.
Okay.
But those who call themselves as people representing India, I have a problem with them. They don't represent India. They represent a political coalition which is UPA 2 and 3 now, and they cannot usurp country's name for themselves, and because they also know they cannot usurp a country's name for themselves, that's why they chose I dot N dot D dot I dot A dot. So that's who they are, the dotted existence.
Okay. Let's talk about dotted existence, because obviously in the G20, and I want to bring it back to the G20, you've been asked this question on a number of occasions last couple of days, but I have to ask you this about the leaders of Russia and China not attending the G20. How much of a roadblock is that, especially in finding consensus and finding a joint statement?
So I would say by the time the things reach the leaders, the consensus building exercise or negotiations usually have taken place beforehand. And it's only after that the leaders come to the summit and they take the stage. So consensus building or negotiations happen before that. So all that exercise is going on, is being worked at, various meetings have happened. So all that happens irrespective of presence of the leader. And it's a country's prerogative to send who they wish to send. Many a times, I would say, a whole lot of us are unable to go. I mean, at which level you want country's representation is the prerogative of the country. So whether it's Z or Li, it's for them to decide. It's going to be represented by the Foreign Affairs Minister or the President. It's for them to decide. We cannot really interpret it one way or the other.
Okay, we have a couple of audience questions. My colleague Sharon is there with the mic, so please go ahead. Identify yourself and keep your question short, please.
Yes,
Thank
Zaka. So we have a retired squadron leader, Varsha, who has a question for the Honorable Minister.
Ma'am, good evening.
Hi.
And first of all, I want to thank you for taking up the cause of lady officers, and thank you because you've got our rights. I mean,
Thank you.
so that is one. And now that we know that the Chinese premier is not attending, will it make a difference in the G20 meet, or is it because of Ukraine? क्योंकि हमने सुना है फूफा जी नहीं आ रहे.
कौन नहीं आ रहे?
फूफा जी नहीं आ रहे.
I don't know what she means, but I think we asked this question about whether it will make an impact on the consensus finding. But
So it doesn't matter, really. So most of the, you must understand, on every working group, there would have been at least 4 consultations. On every political statement, there are multiple consultations on the table, across the table, behind the scenes. There's this consensus building and an outcome document, or the chair summary happens every engagement. So whether a country finally gets represented by person A, B, C, it's of very little material consequence. So, and it does not impact the outcome as such. And whatever will be the outcome document, say on sustainability, on climate finance, on availability of technology, etc. So all those things will happen irrespective of whichever country is there.
all right, Sharon, I think Colonel here has a question.
Ma'am, good evening.
Good evening.
So you mentioned about the holistic approach to how to assess bilateral relations with any country. You gave a lot of parameters from technology to everything else, including environment and other parameters. Keeping US and Russia out of the equation, because we already have a strategic partnership with both as a country, which are the next 3 countries in your mind, personal opinion, which India should look at in the future to interact with?
So I think we've made it very clear by engaging with some of the countries close by who are special invitees in this summit, who are not part of G20, but India has called some special invitees. We've got Bangladesh, we've got Oman, we've got UAE. I mean, this is literally look east and look close by. In addition to the fact we picked up the cause of African Union to be co-opted, so we have a strategy in place.
Ma'am, just on the question of, China, again, politically, there's a leader who says, he's recently gone to Ladakh, he was in Pangong, China ne to hamari zameen le li. Politically, how would you respond to this charge that's coming to you again from the opposition?
So I would say, who is charging? A person who was sitting in the embassy when Dokulam was happening. 62, his family ruled the country. Post that, till 84, multiple governments came, multiple political parties ran the government, but 84 onwards, the most favored nation status was given by them. Olympics, the special treatment his mom, who was not the prime minister of the country, was getting. So I think in politics and in democracy, credibility of a person matters the most. So no matter how we look, how badly the campaigns get run, etc., etc., person's personal credibility matters. And I think all these questions are spoken of or casted upon by a person who lacks credibility. So that's my response.
All right, one final question. I think the gentleman in the black, okay, go ahead.
We have a question over here.
With more than 80% of the world GDP, 75% of the global trade, and 60% of the world population standing together at New Delhi G20 summit, what best we can expect from our Indian presidency on the very serious issue of climate change?
Okay, so I must say the question is twofold. When we talk about, our answer is twofold to this question. One is that many a times culture is one thing which we try to introduce ourselves with others. We want people to understand who we are. And Prime Minister's repeatedly said, Vikas bhi or Virasat bhi, which means the heritage. Now, if you look at our heritage, if you look at our culture, we are very sustainable lot. It's part of our traditions, it's part of our existence that we respect animate, inanimate objects, we look after the environment, we look after the plants, we look after the animals, forest dwellers. I mean, our culture is a culture of sustainability, but probably we've never allowed others to understand us that way. So when we have had, 50 plus locations on which these meetings have happened, we've tried to incorporate the local cuisine to local culture, to dance, to music, artifacts, everything else, to showcase that, look, sustainability is not an imposition on us. Sustainability is a way of life for us. And this way of life is probably something we want to showcase and present to the others, that this is who we are, this is our introduction. The second aspect of sustainability is mission life, which again Prime Minister has oft repeated, and he said mission life, which is living for environment. And there the emphasis is on responsible consumption. So until and unless you change the paradigm from consumption patterns, escalating consumption patterns, to responsible consumption patterns, you'll have no control. And attached to this is the aspect of energy justice, that there are people who need 2 square meals a day, 1 fan, 1 refrigerator, 1 heater if you live in snow or wherever, clean cooking medium. So element of responsible consumption will automatically incorporate climate justice also, and also energy justice is part of it. So making people appreciate and understand these are the aspects. In terms of this, we have also showcased that India is one country which has reached its target of non-fossil fuel renewable energy pattern 9 years ahead of its target. So we reached that 9 years ahead of the desired target, which was supposed to be 2030. In addition to the fact that we became more aspirational, and we again set a new target for ourselves. 20% of ethanol mix. On one side, we are providing food grains to the world, including Afghanistan. We have a large population of 1.4 billion people, and yet we are able to produce ethanol. Now that's energy mix and also a very responsible conduct and behavior. So on many fronts, we are the people who, I mean, if I can put it in a little crass manner, but a colloquial way, you put the money where the mouth is. So you just don't chat, you act. So we have acted upon these things, and that has been the main showcase which we have tried to do through these issues. And thus, climate finance is one big issue which is a challenge for the world, and especially Global South gets worst impacted, and there is a debt crisis which is faced by the world. So somewhere these negotiations need to take care of that on one side you have debt crisis, on the other side climate finance need to be made available, in addition to the fact that we led a movement for ISA, International Solar Alliance, CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. So many actions. So we have been more action oriented, and that's the emphasis I'm trying to lay on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Meenakshi Lekhi, Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture.